it's Kerala again. It's been a while, huh? It's been almost, not a year, but a couple of months. I'm back talking about how to write a 5-paragraph essay and to do a little update. Because I find people writing me and telling me that yes, they get what I'm saying and they understand how you structure a 5-paragraph essay, but sometimes their essay still doesn't get an A. Maybe it gets a B, maybe even a B plus, but not an A. And I've been thinking about, after talking to people, I realized that one thing I did not take in consideration when I did, this is like my rubric or I call it my stool. So let's look at the stool again, and I added 2 more legs that might be helpful. So if you remember from my other video, I talk about how do you make a 5-paragraph essay, or how do you write a 5-paragraph essay. And I said, number 1, you have the leg. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 legs, I think. But I'm going to add 2 more, 5 and 6. And this might help you go from that B plus, to not just an A minus, but to an A, and maybe even an A plus, so that you can become a scholar and maybe even be able to win, I don't know, scholarship money or recognition. You don't know. Once you're able to express yourself in writing as well as in speaking, but most of us can do that in speaking, but in writing, you'd be amazed how different you look at writing and how different you read. So let's look at it. So if you remember, the first leg is structure. How do you structure a 5-paragraph essay, correct? So that's structure. And when you're talking about structure, you're talking about a couple of things. Number 1, obviously you're talking about the thesis statement, which is a statement of opinion, not a fact. Remember that, never forget that. And then you give your 3, 1, 2, 3 sub-thesis statement. Your sub-thesis statement, which support your thesis statement. And each sub-thesis statement becomes, let me let you just look, see this here. Each sub-thesis statement becomes the thesis statement of a paragraph. So sub-thesis number 1 becomes the thesis or the main idea in body paragraph 1. Because when you put your thesis statement and your sub-thesis statement to open up the essay, that's the introductory paragraph. But in body paragraph number 1, sub-thesis number 1 becomes a thesis statement. In body paragraph number 2, sub-thesis number 2 becomes the thesis statement. So therefore, you're only going to talk about, in body paragraph 2, sub-thesis number 2. And obviously, in body paragraph number 3, sub-thesis number 3 becomes the thesis. So you're only going to be talking about that. And I would give at least 3 facts or 3 very strong opinions when you're talking about sub-thesis number 1 in body paragraph number 1, sub-thesis number 2 in body paragraph number 2, and sub-thesis number 3 in body paragraph number 3. So that should be clear because I already talked about that in the prior video. Okay. Your conclusion is important, right? And therefore your conclusion, definitely you should never introduce a new subject in your conclusion. Your conclusion should just say blah, 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 and therefore, that is, you summarize your thesis statement. I also include my sub-thesis statements in my conclusion so that I'm very clear. This is practically a review, right? You also, when you're talking about writing a 5-paragraph essay, You're also going to be taking a very good look at grammar. Your grammar has to be good. Because if I can't read or understand what you want me to read and understand, the 5-paragraph essay doesn't work. So grammar. I'm a little bit squeezed in there. I should have, put more distance, right? We talked about this before. What is grammar? You're talking about parts of speech. You're talking about verbs, the most important part of speech. Nouns, adverbs, adjectives. I should say adjectives, adverbs, prepositions. These are all parts of speech. And I talk about different parts of speech in the different videos that I have available in my YouTube channel. Then you're talking about vocabulary. How do you use the words in order to make the best effect? Vocabulary. Very good, very interesting. I think you should get, number one, you should definitely get a dictionary, because a dictionary will really help you to define your term. And there's another book. I'm looking at my little library here. I thought I had a copy of it. It's called the Synonym Finder. I'll come back and I'll leave a link of where you can go and find that. It's sort of like a dictionary, and it gives you different words that more or less mean the same thing. But it's very careful to let you know that in certain circumstances, this word and this word, even though in other circumstances they might mean the same, in other circumstances they don't. Because in English, you don't have that many synonyms. I can only think of one, couch and sofa, which means exactly the same thing. Okay, now, punctuation, which is extremely important. People don't think it is. They think they can just write anything and just put any kind of punctuation. But punctuation tells you where to stop. It tells you what to emphasize. So when I talk about punctuation, I'm also talking about what letters do you put in uppercase, what letters do you put in lowercase, right? I'm also talking about, obviously, about periods and commas and question marks. But also semicolons. Semicolons are important. When do you use a semicolon versus a period? And why would you use one versus the other? Since both separate independent clause from independent clause, right? And I don't think I've done a video on this, but I will. I will do a video solely on semicolons because I think they're very important because they say something. There's a difference when you stop. You do a sentence or a clause, and you separate it by a semicolon versus a period. You know what? The video's running a little bit long, so I'm going to come back. And when I come back, I'm going to talk about the last two things. The last two legs, and this I haven't discussed before, is critical thinking. That's very important, especially if you're a college student. But even if you're a high school student, that's important. Even if you're a grade school or middle school student, it's important to start thinking critically. And the last is audience. Know your audience. So I just put here audience. So when I come back, I'm going to talk in more detail about critical thinking and about your audience. It's nice to be back. During the time this year or so, what I've been doing is what I've always been doing, studying and researching so that when I come and I do a video, I have new information to give instead of talking about the same thing over and over and over again, because that makes no sense. So this is Coralla Ficklin McLean, right? And I opened up, what is it, tweeting or tweet, right? Right, and an Instagram, and on my next video or later on, I'll share that with you. Because there I'm not talking about anything academic, I'm talking about hair. And how hair, and this just goes to critical thinking, symbolizes more than just, what's on your head. But that's another story. So thank you very much, and I will be back, and I will be talking about critical thinking and the audience. Thank you.